welcome to the first lecture on anatomy and physiology. And of course, the first thing that we probably need to do is define what do we mean by anatomy, what do we mean by physiology. Anatomy really has to do with structure. In other words, what does the part we're talking about look like, where is it, and what does it do? Now, physiology deals more with the function. Not only what does it do, but how does it do what it does. So we'll be covering both anatomy and physiology, and they do kind of go together. Gross anatomy is one of the levels of anatomy, and it's basically for structures that we can physically see with the naked eye, usually things at the organ and gland level, system level, or things that we can see for the most part. So when we do dissections, we'll be basically looking at gross anatomy. When we look at models, we'll be even noticing and looking at gross anatomy. Microscopic anatomy, of course, is at a different level of organization. And it's things that we can basically see as we look through the microscope. And this is mostly seen at a tissue and a cellular level. One of the most important themes that we'll talk about the whole semester will be the levels of organization. And the levels of organization are very important because we need to know what makes up whatever subject we're talking about. In other words, when we're talking about a whole human being, what are they made up of? Well, first, they're made up of 11 organ systems. What are the organ systems made up of? Well, they're made up of the organs, and then what are organs made up of? They're made up of the tissues and so forth. So this is like super important because when we're talking about something, we want to know where we're at in our levels of organization. So I'll be emphasizing this a lot, almost on everything that we do, so we need to really understand it now. Now, if you look at this picture, and we can either start from large and go small, or start from small and go large, this picture sums it up, but I've also included some other pictures that also emphasize this because of its importance. Let's start from large and go small and just talk just a little bit. Notice that there's the organism, which is the individual person, and they're made up of 11 different systems, and in this picture we actually see the cardiovascular system as one of the 11. Within the cardiovascular system there are organs, the heart and the blood vessels, and we're looking in this particular picture at the organ level being the blood vessels, the veins, arteries, and capillaries. And when we look at any organ, we know it's made up primarily of tissues. And the tissues, there's actually four classifications of tissues and sub-classifications under those. But the tissue that we see in this example is smooth muscle tissue, but we'll be covering the 4 tissue levels. Then tissues are further broken down into cells, and cells really is the lowest level we can go that's considered living. We'll talk about what we mean biologically by what characteristics you have to have if you are living. But for right now, just understand this is the lowest living level. But we can still break it down into smaller subdivisions, and we really break it down into molecules, which we divide into organic and inorganic molecules. And those molecules are further broken down into the atoms that actually make up those molecules. So we'll be going down into the atomic and even talking about the subatomic particles that create the bonds in the molecules. But all these levels are important to understand, and because for both anatomy and physiology, we need to understand what's happening in the body. Again, looking at our levels of organization from a little bit bigger perspective, here we see again at the top of the page the individual organism, the individual, and then we see the representation of the 11 different systems that actually make up the individual. Now again, they've chosen to show the cardiovascular system, but we really have 11 systems, and they really do work together, and usually what goes on in one affects what goes on in the others. So we'll talk also individually about what each system does, but right now, just as far as understanding how things are organized, we do see the systems, and we know that the systems are then further broken down into organs. we see the organ, one of the organs in the cardiovascular system, the heart, and of course the heart does a specific job, but the heart is made up of different tissues. The dominant tissue that makes up the heart being cardiac muscle tissue. Now, it's not the only tissue in the heart, but it is the dominant tissue. And we'll talk about what we mean exactly by tissues a little bit later. The tissues are further broken down into similar cells that are doing a similar job. So cardiac muscle tissue is going to be broken down into cardiac muscle cells, or as they say in this picture, heart muscle cells, that do a specific job, mainly of contracting. Now, when we go below the cellular level, we go to the molecular level, which is going to be either organic or inorganic molecules, which we're going to have both in the cells. In the picture, though, we happen to see a specific organic molecule, which is a protein. And then as we look further down, we actually see the names of, we see the representations of the proteins making up the filament. And those proteins, as we will learn later, will be actin, myosin, troponin, and tropomyosin. And we see actin, troponin, and tropomyosin in the next to last picture. Then when we look at our lowest level, atoms, we actually find out that most organic molecules, or all organic molecules, are going to have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But since this is protein, it's also going to have nitrogen in it. And of course, those are atoms. Let's run through these 11 systems very quickly and just talk about what the major components of the system is, from at least the organ level, and also what the system is doing for us. The first system we're going to look at, the integumentary system, it's really unique because it's kind of both a system and an organ. The integumentary system being the body, one of the 11 body systems, but made up of an organ called the integument, which we commonly call the skin. I like to compare this to the fact that Australia is both a continent and a country, so the integument is both a system and an organ. Now, what does this do for us? Well, obviously, it protects us by covering us, preventing, it actually works as part of our immunity, prevents things from our external world from just going internally very easily, forms this barrier. It also does things like it's our largest sensory organ because there are nerve endings in there that help us detect a lot of stimuli, a lot of information from the outside world. And then something it also does, it helps us make vitamin D, and we'll talk about what vitamins do for us a little bit later when we talk about enzymes and some of the chemicals in the body. So it does protect us, and it actually makes you beautiful. Okay, the skeletal system is made up of organs, that most of them we call bones. It also includes the cartilage, a type of connective tissue, and joints are literally anywhere where two bones come together. Now, we mainly think of the joints being those things that come together where they can move past each other or have movement, but literally joints are anywhere bones come together. Now, what does our skeleton do for us? Well, it forms a framework that kind of holds everything together. It protects the things that are encased in it. Obviously, our brain is totally surrounded by our skull. Our heart and lungs are fairly well protected by our whole thoracic, rib cage, sternal area. So we are protecting several important organs. Our spinal cord is totally surrounded. Even our abdominal area and pelvic area is protected, at least from the posterior side, from the pelvic region of bones. Also, another important thing is that they serve as an attachment site for muscles to attach, so we can actually move our bodies by attaching a movable organ, such as a muscle, to the bones. Something that often gets overlooked, this is where our blood cells are formed within our bone marrow. So if we didn't form our blood cells, we're not going to live very long. And then finally, we do store minerals such as calcium and a few other minerals, and this helps us maintain a balance of these chemicals in our blood system and in our body. Our next system is our muscular system, and we do have different types of muscles. This is talking about skeletal muscles, and of course when we talk about muscles, a couple of things that we should always consider is that muscles are necessary for movement, but muscles move by contracting or shortening, so the movement is only in one direction. So if we can move in more than one direction, we have to have muscles that go in more than one direction. Muscles are often layered over each other, again, for variety of ability of movements, and we have over 700 muscles. Now, muscles, we talk about they should contract or they shorten. And sometimes this contraction or shorten doesn't necessarily move something, but it may hold something in position, so we would say would maintain our posture. And then last but not least, one of the most important functions that muscle does, which we intuitively know it, is it produces heat. Well, we need a certain amount of body temperature to stay in a homeostatic range of health. And so our body temperature is produced by our muscles. Now, it's circulated by our blood, but it is produced by our muscles. So this is a super important function. One of our two systems that really control our body, control what's going on, and we're conscious of some of the things it's doing, but most of the things it's doing we're not even conscious of because it's doing it autonomically. But this system we're somewhat familiar with is our nervous system, and of course the key organs in the nervous system are what's both in our central nervous system, which is basically our brain and spinal cord, and our peripheral nervous system, which is our organs called nerves. Now, this is a system that controls us by very fast-acting neurotransmitters and nerve impulses called action potentials that cause neurotransmitters to be released. And so, again, this is something that when we need quick responses to something going on in the body, this controls those quick responses. Now, the effects usually don't last extremely long, but we can continually send signals to get these quick responses. So this is going to respond to things going on both externally, things happening outside our body that we detect or that we such as even seeing something or hearing something or feeling some sort of touch response, or something that's going on internally within our body, and then we're going to send messages. And basically, our nerve impulses are sent to three different things. They are sent to from neuron to neuron. They are also sent to muscles, and they are sent to glands, so we can get some sort of response from these three things. The other system that controls our body, but it does it in a slightly different way, is our endocrine system. Whereas the nervous system uses neurotransmitters for the most part to get things done within the body, the endocrine system actually uses hormones, which are also chemicals. Neurotransmitters are sent very quickly, but yet the effects don't last long, but the hormones are not necessarily sent quickly, but their effects last a long time. So the hormones are responsible for several changes that go on, and usually over periods of time. One thing about this system is it's usually made up of glandular tissue or glandular tissue that is part of other organs that also have other functions. Just a few of the things that hormones do is they're responsible for growth, for reproduction, for metabolism, or how fast we burn our energy. Now, that's a very short list of what's actually going on, but it's a good list to start with. So again, our endocrine system is one of our controllers of the body using chemicals called hormones that are causing a slow but long-term change.